going to talk about how Weld Fume is really attacking the profitability of your business. It sneaks up on you. People don't necessarily think all the time about Weld Fume. It's out there, we know it's there, we know it's not good for our employees, but we don't think about the health of our business in relation to it. There are a lot of different things that affect it, and we're just going to touch on them. This is not a presentation about the effects on the worker per se, it's more a presentation about the effects on the profitability of your business. Just so we can talk a little bit about Weld Fume, so we're all on the same page, just to simply define it, it's a toxic mixture of gases and particles released during the welding or grinding process. And as you know, Weld Fume flows up, it's natural, so it's easy to inhale. One of the really concerning things is it's just recently being classified as a Class 1 carcinogen. So it joins the dubious distinction of being in the same group as asbestos and formaldehyde. And as you know, growing up and watching people take formaldehyde tiles out of their houses, out of their insulation, countertops, between the formaldehyde and the asbestos, when you watch those people do that and try and protect themselves from a Class 1 carcinogen, that is where people are going when they think of Weld Fume now, because of this dubious distinction. What is also concerning is when we're out in the field, we see a lot of companies choosing to equip their welders with fresh air masks or respirators. I applaud them for taking that initiative to take that first step. The concern that we see out there with it is they're not utilizing capture at source in that situation. And capture at source not only protects the welder, but it protects everybody else in the facility. And when you're looking at that, you also need to consider that everybody else is affected by the Weld Fume. It's kind of like when you're a kid and they tell you not to pee in the pool because there's no non-peeing section in the pool. It's the same with air. Once it's in there, everybody's affected. How much Weld Fume are we really discussing? Typically, our studies show that anywhere between 1/3 and 2/3 of welders' time is actually spent welding. The rest is, shuttling around work, working, reading blueprints, that kind of thing. When we're talking welding, we're talking anywhere between 20 and 40 grams of Weld Fume is produced within an hour. That doesn't really seem like a lot, does it? 20 to 40 grams, not a whole lot. When you look at it over a year span, because we know things pile up, my wife keeps reminding me of those extra pounds that keep piling up every year. It's a cumulative effect. It eventually affects the health of your business and the health of your employees. So 35 to 70 kgs is about the weight of another human being that is going right through that breathing space, not only welders, but the other people in your production area. How does this affect your bottom line? It affects the absenteeism. So when people don't show up to work, those are production hours because they're not there. You can't bill for it. Presenteeism, when people are there, they're just not at their best. And also, we're producing ozone, which is natural when you're welding, to produce ozones. Everybody knows it's part of the, the radiation interacting with the oxygen in the atmosphere to produce ozone. We need to be able to minimize that or deal with it, get it out of the workspace to maximize our production. So these are just some of the common health effects. It's by no means an exhaustive list of health effects with Weld Fume, but you'll notice the biggest thing to notice there is a lot of them are upper respiratory conditions. And it makes sense. You got the Weld Fume coming right up through your breathing zone. You're breathing it in, it's going to affect it. There was a study done by the British Journal of Industrial Hygiene that looked at welders exposed to Weld Fume and people in a controlled situation that were not exposed to Weld Fume and their amount of time absent. What it found is it's 2 to 3 times more time off for welders and people exposed to Weld Fume versus not. 2 to 3 times for upper respiratory illnesses. Those are hours you can't bill for. That's a big deal, isn't it? And that did take into account lifestyle choices such as smoking and things like that to make sure the controls and the controls and the welders kind of on the same playing field in terms of those decisions. So if you look at it, for your average welder or person in production, that's about $3,000 annually if you look at a roughly $85 shop rate. That's a little chunk of money, isn't it? Everybody, no employer is going to cut an employee an extra $3,000 check for nothing. Well, why wouldn't you want to kind of minimize that cost? So let's look at this in a real life situation. Let's say there's a company out there, has 5 employees, $85 shop rate. We know welders have 2 to 3 times the amount of time missed at work due to upper respiratory illnesses. Let's assume just by putting in good capture at source weld fume extraction, we can reduce that by 70%. We're talking 2 to 3 times the amount of sickness, but we're saying, hey, we're just going to reduce it 70%. A small shop like that can see a realization of $15,000 in increased productivity. And over a 5-year span, $80,000. Not bad for a small shop. Anybody here hear of presenteeism before? Just to show hands. Okay. Oh, we've got somebody, so we're covering some new ground here. Presenteeism is when people show up, and we all do it, you're not feeling well. So you get up, you go into work, you don't want to let your customer down, you don't want to let your other fellow employees down, you don't want to let your boss down. So show up, do your best, but I know for myself, I'm not as effective when I'm ill as when I'm feeling good. This is the same for everybody else. It's been documented that roughly about 30% of productivity is lost when somebody comes to work sick. Doesn't mean they're intentionally trying to do it, it's just part of being human. Presenteeism for the average worker, so it's not somebody that is working in an environment with weld fume, is attributed to 67 hours a year of lost productivity. So that's where the employer is paying that person and getting zero output from them just because they're not well. It makes sense to minimize that, absolutely. When you're looking at it, 67 hours for absenteeism, for presenteeism, your average absenteeism is around 30 hours or a little less. So absenteeism is a much bigger problem, or presenteeism is a much bigger problem than absenteeism. I would put out there, I think it's a reasonable assumption to look at presenteeism in our business, knowing that welders have upper respiratory illnesses and things that will make them feel ill, 2 to 3 times more than people not exposed to weld fume. I think it's pretty reasonable to think it's a bigger problem for us than other businesses. I think you can also assume that if we address this, we can increase our productivity. Assuming a modest 30% increase in presenteeism, knowing that we got 2 to 3 times more respiratory diseases, is reasonable. So if a company were able to address that through capture source, they'd be able to get $8,500 in increased productivity, in 5-year cumulative $42,000, and that's just a small company. Something we don't talk about a whole lot is the ozone and created during welding and the effect on productivity. It's documented that you can gain a 4.2% increase in productivity by reducing the ozone level in the work area. So again, that doesn't just necessarily affect the welder, it affects everybody in that breathing area. To look at this, basically, the amount of ozone can be up to 1,000 parts per million. Now that's something to keep in mind for our next slide. If I can reduce 10 parts per billion, so not per million, per billion of ozone in the workplace, I can increase my productivity by 4.2%. Having capture at source is the most efficient way to get that gas and that particulate out. That's not a really big stretch. Your workers are going to feel like and think clearer. They're going to feel better. They're going to make better decisions. They're going to put a higher quality product. Those are all things that make companies more productive. Now we think of our little 5-man company we've been referring to all the way along. They can realize an extra $33,000 a year in billable hours by just increasing their productivity, that 4.2%. Over a 5-year cumulative term, $167,000. So if you've been calculating how this company's been doing, they're almost at $300,000 over 5 years for basically a 5-man company in added production. That's huge. The bigger the company, the bigger the payback. It's not all good news for our friends at this 5-man company. We're a trade in transition, and we're no different than the automotive trade, buildings trade, the woodworking trade. In the welding industry alone, there's going to be 250,000 vacancies in the US for welders, job vacancies, where they can't fill, where they can't be filled. That's huge. So you've got jobs, you just can't fill them. It's not that you can't fill them with good people, you just can't fill them. So, and that is going to be made a bigger problem as you see baby boomers retiring. The Gen Xers are a small generation, and there's not enough of them. They're the second smallest living generation next to the greatest generation, and there's not enough Gen Xers to fill those spots. So the millennials, thank goodness they're quick learners and they're the most educated generation, are going to have to learn very quickly, gain experience very quickly, and follow in behind. When you look at the people in this room, it's pretty obvious that there's some young people, not a lot of young people. So we've got an issue, and the issue is the millennials, who within 5 years are going to be the largest working generation. They're not interested in the trades. They see the trades as being basically low-level, mindless work, low-paying, dirty, and dangerous. That falls on us. That doesn't fall on them as an industry for not communicating what a rewarding business this can be, both financially and professionally. We need to change that. There is good news, though. The schools are really stepping up. They've realized this, and they're trying to get the millennials who do decide they want to look at getting into welding as a career. They're putting in fantastic facilities. They're putting in clean, safe facilities that look like laboratories to get millennials interested, to show them it can be a safe place to work. It can be a clean place to work. You're going to be healthy. Capture from source is a big part of that. Once people grow up in that kind of environment, they are not going to accept working in a different environment where it's dirty and smoky and dangerous. Won't do it. So couple that with the impending shortage of good qualified welders, that's a big deal. So let's say you've got some good employees, you got to keep them. You can't have people going, well, I don't feel well anymore. How many times do you hear people say, I'm too old to do this now? What they're really saying is, I'm too sick, I don't feel good enough. If we can clean up the air, we can clean up their workspace, their environment, you'll keep people longer. You'll retain people. We need to do that. And people don't look at the cost of replacing an employee. Typically speaking, an employee, you can take about 38% of their first year salary, and you're investing into recruiting them, hiring them, and training them afterwards, even if they're experienced, because every company's expectations are different. There's different politics, there's different, there's a learning curve with every organization. So if you have a welder making $40,000 a year, it's going to cost you $15,000 to bring them up to speed to producing where the previous person was. That's a big deal. Something else to keep people producing more. Canada, we're the land of ice and snow. We love our country, but we don't have a whole lot of options for fume control. We can keep our doors closed, keep it a little nice and toasty in the shop, and breathe in that weld fume, and lose all the production or productivity advantages we talked about. To me, not a great option. We can open the building, the doors, let the fume out, and you know, we're tough. We're Canadian. We don't mind a little bit of cold weather, but after a while it can grate on you, and it costs a little bit more when you have to bring that building back up to temperature. Or you can invest in proper fume extraction and filtration. There's a number of different options. I prefer filtration personally, because it effectively cleans the air. It reintroduces the air that you've already paid to heat back into the facility. It keeps people warmer, keeps people happier. Thermal comfort there's a whole bunch of different studies that have gone into this, not just in our industry, but overall, that are looking at thermal comfort and the productivity advantages to it. When you look at the buildings all around downtown Montreal, those building managers are looking at those buildings, making improvements, and justifying those improvements based on the productivity gains by increasing the temperature 1, 2, 3 degrees. And we're talking millions of dollars in justification. The payback is very quick. We can apply the same thing in our business. By increasing the temperature 2 degrees towards an ideal temperature, and it ranges depending on what you're doing. For some businesses it's 20 degrees, for some businesses it's 15. You can get a 1% increase in productivity. Again, it all adds up. If we look at our little shop, it's a 5-man shop, $85 shop rate. In the 15-week cold period, we'll say, you get $250,000 in billable hours. They get an additional $12,000 by raising the temperature 10 degrees. That's a 5% increase. The last part we're going to talk about is the effect of not having good capture at source weld fume control on your equipment. Not only, does not having good fume control, capture at source of fume control, make your plant dirtier, because you've got stuff all over the place. You also have the effect on your equipment, because let's face it, all the equipment today has cooling fans, wiring, circuit boards, transformers. All that's affected by particulate and weld fume. Increases your maintenance costs, increases or decreases the amount of time service life you get out of the equipment. You've got to protect your people, your profit, and your equipment. So what are the solutions? You can do extraction, you can do filtration. There's a solution for everybody. Basically, you've got extraction, which basically sucks the weld fume particulate directly out and deposits it outside the building or outside the work area. That's a good entry-level step. A lot of provinces are starting to crack down on the emissions from that. You have to be careful when you're doing that. You do have slightly higher heating costs in the winter versus a filtration system, and you're really not taking environmental responsibility for some of the things you're picking out there, like manganese and hex chrome. We have the filtration options for people as well, and this is taking it to the next level. So you're taking all that particulate, you're taking all that fume, you're sucking it out, you're running it through filters, you're cleaning it up, and you're reintroducing that air back into the facility. So you're reducing your need for air makeup, you're reducing your need for heat. It's a really nice system, and again, it's scalable. If you're a small shop, you can do a portable unit. If you need a lot of mobility, you can do a portable unit. If you've got a big shop and you want to filter the ambient air, you can do that too. You can have a closed system. There's all kinds of options, there's all kinds of people that can help you with that and advise you. It's just finding the right fit for you. I always get asked, and I know our people in the field get asked, how much filtration should I go for? It's a touchy situation, and when I first got into the business, I was asked that, and I didn't know the answer, but then I started to think about a trip I took to El Paso, Texas a few years ago, and was there for a couple of meetings, and typically when I travel, I drink the local water out of the tap. Had my meetings, and El Paso's a beautiful city. If you haven't been there, it's in Texas, and it's right across the border from Mexico. The Rio Grande runs through it. Great spot. I went home, back to Oklahoma. We were going through a huge drought, and on the news, they had the public water system in El Paso on there as a bastion of what we should be doing in Oklahoma. And then they were talking about how they're recycling sewage and using it for drinking water. And I thought, great, I've been drinking sewage for 3 days. Then I decided I'd watch the story, get the whole story, and yeah, they're filtering it to 99.9%. I started to feel pretty good about it, and then I started to think, hey, you know what? Being in hotels, restaurants, maybe the glasses aren't that clean. There's probably more contaminants in the glass than there is in the water. I became okay with it. Then when I got into the welding business, I started seeing filtration rates of 85%. And people are doing that because it's less expensive. You know, you can save a little bit of money that way. Me looking at it, I'm going, equating it back to the water and going, I ain't drinking water that's only 85% clean and 15% sewage, forget it, I'm not doing it. With the amount of air we drink, or air we breathe versus the water we drink, clean air is way more important than clean water. You only drink less than 1/10 of a liter of water per hour. You breathe 60 to 100 liters of air per hour. That's how important this is. So my answer is, get the best you can get for your application. So you can see even the smallest little bits of incremental growth you can get in production time and production efficiency really adds up. We need to make sure that we can maintain a good, healthy, clean workforce because that supports a good, healthy, clean profit. When you look at source fume extraction, you can see the payback is a few months. It is not very expensive when you look at the overall productivity gains and production gains and health gains. Basically, you can go from a solution of $2,000 up to, sky's the limit.